It was just another busy afternoon at the airport. People rushed from gate to gate, rolling their suitcases behind them, checking their phones, sipping coffee, and talking loudly on calls. The sounds of flight announcements echoed through the large terminal. Families hugged. Businessmen scrolled through emails. Children cried in strollers. It was chaos, but it was normal. Among the crowd stood a quiet man in a simple gray coat. He didn't look rich. He didn't look strong or important. His coat was plain, his shoes were dusty, and his leather bag looked old, worn out from years of travel. He had no security around him, no assistant, no smile, just calm, serious eyes that quietly observed. Everything around him, the staff at the security checkpoint barely glanced at him. One of the younger officers, a woman named Erica, nudged her coworker and whispered, "Look at that one. He looks like he came straight off a bus." Her coworker chuckled, probably lost. Economy line is that way. They laughed quietly while the man stood still, slowly moving forward with the line. His name was James Harris. But nobody at that checkpoint knew that. They didn't know that the man in the gray coat was the CEO of Elysium Airlines, one of the largest, most powerful airline companies in the world. They didn't know that just 2 hours earlier, James had flown in from Tokyo in a private jet under a different registration. And they didn't know that he was here for one very specific reason. He was inspecting the airport, not as a CEO, not as a boss, but as a silent observer. James didn't like red carpets. He didn't care about press photos or formal greetings. That's why he chose to wear his usual gray coat. He believed that real power didn't need to speak loudly. It simply moved, quietly, as he reached the front of the line. Officer Erica stepped forward. "Step aside," she said coldly. James gave a polite nod and moved his ass. No emotion on his face. No pride. No anger. "Empty your pockets," she ordered. He placed his phone, keys, and passport slowly in the plastic tray. Then he reached into his coat and gently pulled out his ID. Officer Erica picked it up, glanced at it, and scoffed. "What's this? Some printout?" Then she tossed it on the floor. Gasps came from the people behind James in line. Someone muttered, "Why would she do that?" James slowly bent down, picked up the ID, and brushed it clean with his fingers. There was still no anger in his eyes, only silence. "Is there a problem?" he asked gently. Erica rolled her eyes. "Yeah. Next time bring real ID. This looks fake." James just smiled. But about 10 feet away, another airport employee named Marcus had seen everything. He wasn't even part of the security team. He worked in airport logistics. But when James picked up the ID, Marcus caught a glimpse of the name. His heart skipped a beat. He grabbed a colleague's arm and whispered, "Is that James Harris?" His coworker looked confused. "Who?" Marcus looked panicked. "That's the CEO of Elysium Airlines. The guy who owns half the jets here." His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough. People nearby turned their heads. A few passengers began whispering. And Officer Erica suddenly noticed the shift. She looked at James again, this time more carefully. Her eyes scanned the ID again. Now she realized it wasn't a printout. It was a platinum executive access card, something only the top-level airline owners had. Her stomach dropped. James, he didn't speak another word. He simply walked through the gate, collected his things from the tray, pulled out his phone. He typed one short message: "Pull all Elysium flights from this airport, effective immediately." In the control tower, a phone began ringing. In the boardroom upstairs, emergency meetings were called. In the terminal, dozens of airport managers started running down hallways. And Officer Erica, she just stood frozen at the gate. She had no idea that the man she just humiliated could shut down an entire airport in seconds. But now, she was about to find out. Flashback begins 7 days earlier. James sat in a quiet office overlooking the city skyline. He sipped black coffee as his assistant placed 3 reports in front of him. "This one's from Eastwood Airport," she said. "Passenger complaints, delays, mistreatment at security."
Asked for.
You asked for a quiet review? James flipped through the pages. Line after line, he read stories of rude staff, ignored elderly passengers, and even lost luggage from business-class travelers. This can't continue, he said softly. We own 46% of this airport's air traffic. If they don't respect our customers, they don't deserve our business. His assistant nodded. Should I schedule a meeting with their director? James shook his head. No, I'll go myself, but not as a CEO. I want to see how they treat someone with no title, someone who looks invisible. Back to present, that's why James wore the gray coat. That's why he stood alone. That's why he said nothing when they mocked him, because he wanted to see who these people were, when they thought no one was watching. And now he had seen enough. As James walked toward the lounge, a group of uniformed managers ran after him. Their faces were pale. One of them, a senior official, called out loudly, Mr. Harris, please wait. There's been a mistake. James didn't turn around. He simply said it wasn't a mistake. It was their behavior. And kept walking. In the lounge he sat. In a quiet corner, news alerts began popping up on his phone. Social media posts were already spreading. CEO of Elysium Airlines humiliated at Eastwood Airport. Billionaire's ID thrown on the floor by security staff. All flights suspended by Elysium Airport, losing millions per hour. Back at the gate, Officer Erica was pulled aside by airport security. What did you say to that man? A supervisor asked. I didn't know who he was, she stammered. The supervisor glared. That man signs contracts worth more than your entire department. You just cost us millions. Her face turned white. I didn't mean to, but you did, he interrupted. And now we're in crisis. James stayed quiet for the rest of the day. He didn't make public statements, didn't call reporters, didn't need to. His silence spoke louder than anything else. The entire airport system was shaking. News anchors debated whether Eastwood Airport would survive the loss of Elysium flights. Thousands of passengers were stuck. Airlines were panicking. Advertisers pulled out. VIP lounges were shut, and all because of one moment. One officer, one insult, one quiet man in a gray coat, who didn't look important, but owned everything they stood on. James sat alone in the quiet corner of the VIP lounge. The noise of the airport outside didn't reach him. Glass doors were shut. The world was moving fast, but inside, time felt still. He stared at his phone. One message had already been sent. Pull all Elysium flights from Eastwood. No explanations, no delays. His assistant had replied instantly. Understood, media's already asking. Should we speak to them? He typed just 2 words. Not yet. James didn't want revenge. He wanted something else. A change. Meanwhile, the airport was in complete panic. On the big flight screens, one word started appearing again and again next to Elysium flights. Cancelled, cancelled, cancelled. Passengers were confused, angry. Some shouted at staff. Some demanded answers, but the workers had none. They didn't even know yet what had really happened. In the airport's executive office, Director Tom Briggs was on his 3rd phone call in 5 minutes. His face was red. His voice shook. You're telling me Elysium shut down 18 flights just now? He yelled into the phone. How's that even? What do you mean the CEO's already here? He stood up suddenly, knocking over his coffee. Find him now. I don't care if he's in a lounge, restroom, or on the runway. Find him. Back in the VIP lounge, James sipped his tea slowly. He wasn't in a rush. His eyes looked calm, but his mind was sharp. He remembered the officer's face clearly, the way she looked down at him, the way she tossed his ID like it was trash. It wasn't just disrespect. It was something deeper. Arrogance. They judged him because he looked simple, because he was quiet, because he didn't show off. He wondered, how many others had they treated like this? How many elderly passengers? How many immigrants? How many children, travelers, students? And no one ever noticed, because they had no power. But James had power. Now he would use it. A knock came at the lounge door. A nervous manager stepped inside. Sweat ran down his forehead. He bowed slightly. Mr. Harris. I didn't know you were arriving today. We're so sorry about James. Raised a hand calmly. Please, he said. No need for fake apologies. The man froze. James stood up slowly and walked to the window. He looked out at the airplanes parked on the runway. Some had the Elysium logo, painted on them strong wings in blue and silver. He spoke without turning around. Do you know how many jobs we support here? The manager gulped. Nearly 12,000, sir? James nodded, double quotes, and do you know how many passengers choose Elysium at this airport each month? Close to 600,000, sir? James turned to face him now. And yet, staff member, couldn't take one look at my ID. Couldn't treat a human being with basic respect. Tell me how many other people like me walk through that gate every day and leave angry. The manager had no answer. James sighed. That officer wasn't the problem. She's just a symptom. At that moment, Officer Erica sat alone in a small office. Her hands were shaking. Her badge was on the desk. Her supervisor paced in front of her. You realize what you've done? He snapped. I didn't know who he was, Erica said. Quietly, you think that matters? He barked. You mocked a CEO? The CEO? Do you know how much money we've lost already? We may lose our partnership. Our jobs. I was just doing my job, she whispered. He looked like any other guy. Supervisor stopped. That's the problem, he said coldly. All you judged him before he said a single word. Back. In the lounge, James walked toward the exit. The manager beside him asked nervously, Sir, can we arrange a meeting? With the director? With the board? We want to fix this? James paused. Tell them they'll get my answer soon, he said. And then he walked out, disappearing into the crowd once again, just like he had arrived. But this time, everyone was watching. Scene ends with a new mystery as James left the airport. A young woman in a black coat followed him from a distance. She watched him quietly. She took out her phone, snapped a photo of him walking away, and sent it to someone with a message, He's here, just like you said. As James stepped outside the airport, the sky was cloudy. People hurried by. Taxis came and went. But James walked slowly alone. Behind him, someone followed quietly. A young woman, wearing a black coat. Her steps were light. Her eyes were focused. She wasn't a passenger. She wasn't staff. She was watching James, and she wasn't watching for the first time. James walked toward the parking lot. He didn't use VIP exits or private drivers. He believed in moving like a regular man. That's how he saw the truth. He pulled out his phone and texted his driver, I'll walk to the far lot. Pick me up at gate 3 in 10 minutes. As he passed through the crowd, the woman in the black coat kept her distance. She held a small phone in her hand. She zoomed in and took another photo of James from the side. Then she made a call. He's on the move. Yes, alone. No guards. She listened to the voice on the other end, then replied, Understood. I'll wait for your signal. Across the city in a tall office building, a man stood in front of a large screen. He wore a dark gray suit and glasses. He looked serious, cold, calculating. The screen showed live camera feeds from the airport. On one of them, James Harris walked calmly through the parking lot. The man smirked. So he really came himself, he whispered. No guards, no warning, just like old times. An assistant walked up beside him. Sir, do you want me to alert the board? No, the man said sharply. Let him walk. Let him believe he's in control. He smiled again. Soon he'll realize. Not everything is his. Back in the parking lot, James suddenly stopped walking. He felt something. Not a sound, not a sight, just a feeling. Someone was near. He turned around slowly. But the woman had already disappeared behind a parked van. James waited, watched. Then he kept walking. But now he was alert. Flashback begins 4 years earlier. James sat at a table with 3 men and 1 woman. All of them wore suits. All of them had smiles on their faces. They had just signed the biggest airline merger in company history. Elysium Airlines was now worth billions. But there was one man in the room who didn't clap. Victor. Lane James remembered him well. Sharp eyes, ambitious, always looking for a shortcut to the top. Victor didn't like James's way of doing things. He wanted fast money, fast power. And when James rejected his idea to cut staff and sell off smaller routes, Victor walked out of the meeting without a word. Back to present, James sat in the back of his black car. Now, his driver didn't speak. He never did unless spoken to. James looked out the window, but his mind was far away. That woman. Who was she? She wasn't a reporter, not paparazzi. Her eyes weren't curious. They were trained, focused, professional, someone had sent her. And James had a feeling. He knew who, meanwhile. Woman. In the black coat stood on the rooftop of the parking structure. Watching James's car drive away, she spoke into her phone again. He noticed me. She said. The voice on the other end replied, "Good. Him, now it begins." Ending suspense. A secret meeting that night. James arrived at a hidden private airstrip just outside the city. Only a few people knew about this place. As he stepped out of the car, a man in a pilot's jacket walked up too. "Him? Everything ready?" James asked. The pilot nodded. "Yes, sir. But there's something you should know." He handed James a folder. Inside were photos. One of them was clear. A woman in a black coat, taking pictures of James at the airport. James's jaw tightened. "She's not working alone," the pilot said. He traced her last phone call. "To who?" The pilot hesitated and said softly, "Victor Lane." James stared at the photo. Die. His eyes didn't blink. The storm had just begun. Victor Lane once sat beside James Harris at the same table. They once shook hands, smiled at press cameras, and built one of the world's most powerful airline companies together. But now, Victor was planning something behind James's back, something dangerous, something personal, and the woman in the black coat was just the beginning. The next morning, James sat at his private office on the top floor of a quiet building. It wasn't his company headquarters. It was a hidden space, one he used only when something didn't feel right. He stared at the photos in the folder the pilot had given him. Every image showed the same woman. Same black coat, same quiet eyes. It's always watching him. James picked up his phone and called someone. "Find out who she is," he said. "I want a full background. No mistakes." The man on the other end replied, "Already working on it, sir." James hung up and leaned back in his chair. He didn't feel fear. He felt something worse. Betrayal. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small card. It read, "Victor Lane, former executive partner. Elysium Airlines resigned 4 years ago. Reason, unknown." James whispered to himself. He never really left, did he? Meanwhile, Victor Lane stood in a large room filled with computer screens. Maps of flight paths, airline data, and stock markets glowed on every wall. He looked at a live camera feed of the airport from the day before, James picking up his ID from the floor. Victor watched the moment again and again. Then he smiled coldly. "I knew he'd show up in person," he said. Beside him, the woman in the black coat stood quietly. Victor turned to her. "You followed him?" She nodded. "He suspects now. He saw me, but not enough to know why." "Good," Victor replied. "Let him wonder. That's what makes men like him weak. Curiosity." Flashback to 4 years ago, James and Victor stood in a boardroom. Victor slammed a folder onto the table. "This is how we grow," Victor said. "We cut half the ground staff, automate check-ins, sell the smaller routes." James shook his head. "No, that's not how we treat people. This airline is built on service, not speed." Victor laughed. "And how's that working out? You want respect? I want results." James stayed calm. "Want both." Victor's face hardened. "You'll regret this." Then he walked out. He never returned. Back to present, Victor looked at a screen showing the headline. "Elysium cancels flights after CEO faces airport disrespect." He chuckled. "Perfect timing," he said. "Now we move." He walked over to a table and picked up a thick document. It was a proposal flight core merger. Phase 1 takeover strategy. Victor wasn't just watching James. He was preparing to steal the very company they built together. Back at James's office, James. A phone call, sir, the voice said. We've identified the woman. Name Naomi Keller. Ex-military. Intelligence background. Last seen working private security hired 3 months ago by a firm linked to Victor Lane. James nodded slowly. He's not hiding anymore. He stood and walked to the window. It was clear now Victor wanted back in, but James also knew something else. Victor didn't want to return to Elysium. He wanted to own it. From the inside, scene ends with suspense later that night. Naomi sat at a small table in a dark cafe. She was alone, until a young boy walked up to her, handed her a sealed envelope, and walked away. She opened it. Inside was a single message. Phase 2 begins. Make contact. Her eyes narrowed. She knew what that meant. Next, she would meet James Harris's face-to-face. Naomi Keller was trained to move in silence. She had followed presidents, tracked fugitives, protected billionaires. But today, she had one job. Get close to James Harris. No one, not even she, was sure what would happen next. Late evening, private rooftop cafe. James sat at a quiet rooftop cafe he often visited after long days. The city lights flickered below. His tea sat untouched. His mind was still on Victor. On the plan that was clearly unfolding in secret, the airport incident had only been the start. Now someone had sent a message. It was loud as he stared. Into the night sky, he heard a soft voice behind him. Mind if I sit here? He turned slowly. Naomi stood beside the table, dressed in a simple black jacket, no makeup. No smile, just calm eyes. James studied her for a moment. He already knew who she was. Go ahead, he said, motioning to the chair opposite him. They sat in silence for a full minute. No one rushed, no one looked away. James finally spoke. Victor sent you. Naomi didn't flinch. I work for myself, she said. But yes, he hired me. James nodded. To spy, to observe. She replied, and if needed, to interfere. James smiled slightly. At least you're honest. Naomi placed a small envelope on the table. This is everything you need to see, she said. Flight Corps' proposal, the timeline, it's the pressure he's building on your board. James didn't touch the envelope. Why are you giving this to me? He asked. Naomi paused. Because Victor doesn't understand you, she said. Thinks you're weak for walking alone. For staying silent? For not showing off your power? But you don't think that? James asked. Naomi leaned in slightly. I think silence can be louder than shouting. I think a quiet man with a clear plan is more dangerous than a loud one. With none, James looked into her eyes. Why are you really here? He asked softly. Naomi hesitated for the first time. Because this is bigger than business, she said. Victor isn't just trying to take your company. He's trying to destroy what you stand for. Flashback Naomi's memory 3 years ago. Naomi worked private security for a different CEO. She remembered being at a luxury hotel where James gave a short speech. She remembered how he thanked even the waiters by name, how he stayed back to speak with the cleaners. She had never seen a man with that much power act that humble. That moment stuck with her. Back to present. James finally picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside were files, photos, documents, proof that Victor had already made secret offers to key investors. He looked up. You're risking everything by showing me this? He said. Naomi nodded. Double quotes maybe, but I'd rather risk my job than help the wrong man win. Just then, a car parked across the street. Inside, Victor sat with binoculars. Watching the two of them, his eyes narrowed. She's talking to him. He picked up his phone. Phase 2 is compromised, he said. Move to Phase 3. End scene suspense. A decision as Naomi stood to leave. She looked at James one last time. You only have a few days. After that, the board will vote. If you don't act, he takes control. James nodded. I will act, he said. But his voice remained calm, because James wasn't planning to fight back with anger. He was planning to crush Victor without saying a single word. James Harris had built Elysium Airlines from the ground. Up respectfully, quietly, with heart. But now the boardroom that once praised him was whispering behind his back. Not everyone sitting at that table was loyal, and one of them had already signed a deal with Victor. Next morning, Elysium. Headquarters, 38th floor, the long glass table in the boardroom was filled with serious faces. 12 members sat in leather chairs, screens in front of them, coffee cups half full. The room smelled of wealth, power, and silence. James entered last. He wore his usual gray coat, no tie. No briefcase, just a folder in hand and calm eyes. Every person in the room stood briefly, but not everyone smiled. At the far end sat David Clay, the chief strategy officer. He used to be James's close friend, but in recent weeks, something had changed. James took his seat and looked around. "Let's begin," he said. The room went quiet as the lead advisor read out loud. Due to the events at Eastwood Airport, the company has experienced reputational backlash. Stocks dropped 4% overnight. Emergency review requested. James didn't speak. He let them talk. Another board member added, "Victor Lane has contacted us privately. He claims he can restore control if we vote on merging with Flight Corps." All eyes shifted toward James. Still, he said nothing. Suddenly, David Clay cleared his throat. "With all due respect," he said, "maybe we need someone more aggressive during times like these. Someone who knows how to fight back. Maybe the airline needs a fresh start." The words hung in the air like smoke. James slowly opened his folder. Inside was the envelope Naomi had given him. He slid it across the table straight to David. "Would you like to explain this?" James asked. David's hands froze. Inside were signed letters, secret emails, and wire transfer records showing David had been working with Victor behind James's back for months. Gasps filled the room. David's face went pale. I was just selling our company piece by piece," James said calmly. "Leaking internal reports, sabotaging staff decisions." Flashback weeks earlier, Victor and David sat in a hotel room. "You helped me get the votes," Victor said, "and I'll make you CEO after the merger." David hesitated. "And James?" Victor smiled coldly. "He'll be a ghost." David shook Victor's hand. Back to present now, David sat in shame. James stood. "I trusted you," James said, "but I don't make the same mistake twice." Turned to the board. "This company doesn't need louder leaders. It needs braver ones." Then he walked out without waiting for a vote. Moments later, Elevator Don James's assistant rushed to him. "Sir, the media's outside. They found out about the airport scandal and the board leak. Reporters everywhere." James didn't panic. He simply nodded. "Let them talk. The world's about to hear my side." Scene ends with Victor watching the news that night. Victor watched. The headlines flash across a large screen. Elysium CEO exposes internal betrayal. Airport scandal deeper than expected. Victor slammed a glass on the table. "She gave him the documents," he growled. "Naomi betrayed us." He picked up his phone. "Find her now." Naomi Keller had risked everything to expose Victor's secret plan. But now, just hours after meeting James, she was gone. No phone signal, no message, no trace. And James knew exactly what that meant. Victor had made his move. Morning, James's private office. James sat at his desk, eyes fixed on the phone in front of him. He had called Naomi 3 times. No answer. He sent 2 messages. No reply. He leaned back, his face combat, his mind racing. Naomi had delivered confidential files just 48 hours earlier. I had risked her job and maybe more to expose Victor now. She had vanished. James called his head of security. "I need eyes on Naomi Keller," he said. "All known addresses, apartment, work history, even emergency contacts." "Yes, sir," came the immediate response. "We'll start now." James hung up, then stared at the small glass window in his office. Rain began tapping against it. His gut told him one thing. Naomi didn't just disappear. Someone made her disappear. Meanwhile, unknown location, Naomi sat in a dimly lit room. Her hands were tied, but not tightly. She wasn't bruised, She wasn't gagged, but she wasn't free. Either. She looked around. The walls were plain. No windows. Just a steel door. The only sound was a small vent humming in the ceiling suddenly. The door opened. Victor Lane stepped inside. He wore his usual sharp suit, but no smile. "I thought you were smarter," he said, "but you chose the wrong side." Naomi didn't flinch. "I chose the honest one," she said. Victor walked slowly toward her. "You gave James the documents," he said. "You handed him my plan." She looked him dead in the eye. "I did." "Because you're not just trying to..." "When you're trying to burn everything down?" Victor leaned closer. "I built that company too." "No," Naomi replied. "Poisoned it." Victor stood still. His eyes were cold. Then he turned and walked toward the door. "I won't hurt you," he said, "but I will keep you quiet until after the vote." And with that, the door shut again. Back at James's office, 3 hours passed. No update. Then a knock on the door. His security chief entered. "Sir, we tracked Naomi's last known location." "Where?" "She checked into a coffee shop yesterday near your building. She stayed for 30 minutes. Then her phone signal disappeared on a side street camera." James stood up. "Show me." The security chief placed a tablet on the table. Footage was grainy but clear. Naomi walked alone into a side alley. After that dash, nothing. No exit. No return. James stared at the screen. "She was taken," he said quietly. Flashback Naomi's training 10 years ago. Naomi sat in a training room surrounded by soldiers. An instructor stood at the front. In the field. "Silence is your weapon," he said. "But truth is your anchor. If you forget why you're fighting, you've already lost." Naomi had never forgotten those words, not once. Back to present, James knew he couldn't go to the police, not yet. Victor had people in too many places, but he could act. He opened a drawer and took out a file. It was labeled Project Haven. His assistant walked in. "Sir, what is Project Haven?" James looked up. "It's something I built, in case things ever went this far." Scene shift, secret operations hub. Later that evening, James entered a hidden location underground, a private command center known only to his most trusted team. It looked nothing like a corporate office. Screens, maps, communication tools, and security monitors covered the walls. 3 men stood waiting. They saluted him. "Activate Haven," James said. "Find Naomi." Quietly. A tech expert named Deacon pulled up a digital map. He found 3 possible drop-off zones within 2 miles of where she vanished. "We've got thermal scans, car movements, and a few vehicles that disappeared from public tracking." Another team member added, "And one of those cars belongs to a security firm, tied to Victor's holding company." James's jaw tightened. "Move now," he said. "I want eyes on that building in 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Naomi's room. Naomi sat quietly, breathing slowly. She knew someone would come. She didn't panic. She counted the seconds, studied the vent, checked the floor tiles. Every little detail could be a clue. Then she heard a voice through the wall. It was faint. A man speaking on the phone in another room. She pressed her ear closer and heard, "Keep her inside until after the vote. Once Victor takes the chair, she becomes useless." Naomi's eyes narrowed. Victor wasn't just trying to win. He was planning to take over Elysium by force. Scene ends with a final twist. Back at the command center, James stood before a screen showing a blurry thermal scan of a building outside the city. Deacon circled a spot. "There," he said. "One person inside, not moving, could be her." James nodded. "Prepare a team." But just as they turned to go, an alert appeared on the main screen. Unauthorized. Login detected. James stared at the monitor. Someone had accessed Elysium's boardroom. Servers remotely. It wasn't Victor. It wasn't David Clay. It was someone inside James's own executive team. And James realized Victor wasn't working alone. There was another traitor. And they were closer than anyone imagined. James was minutes away from launching a quiet rescue mission for Naomi. But what he didn't know was Naomi had been carrying a secret all along. One that connected her to James. and one that could change everything. Night. Outside a secure building near the city's edge, 3 black vehicles moved through a dark alley with their lights off. Inside one of them, James sat in the back seat, eyes locked on a small screen showing live drone footage above the building. His voice was calm, but firm. Confirm position. Target is inside, room with no windows. 2 guards at the north door, 1 at the rear, replied Deacon. The team leader beside him, James, gave a nod. No weapons. No noise. We walk in, we walk out. She's not a soldier anymore. She's a person who helped us. Understood, said Deacon. Mission begins in 60 seconds. Inside the building, Naomi sat on the cold floor, back against the wall. Her wrists had been tied again, not roughly, but enough to keep her still. She wasn't afraid. She was tired. She closed her eyes and whispered quietly to herself, "He's not like the others. He won't leave me behind." Just then, she heard footsteps. A key turned in the lock. The door opened, but it wasn't Victor. It was one of James's men, dressed in black. Face covered. He quickly moved inside, cut her ropes, and whispered, "Ma'am, James sent us. You're safe now." Naomi's eyes watered, but she said nothing. They moved fast, quiet. Within 2 minutes, she was in the back seat of a black SUV speeding through the dark, back at the secret command. Center James stood by the door as Naomi entered the room. She looked weak, but alive. He didn't say a word. Neither did she. They just stood there for a moment. Then Naomi spoke softly. "I knew you'd come." James gave a small smile. "You kept your word, so did I." But then Naomi took something. Out of her coat pocket, it was a small envelope, worn but sealed. She handed it to him. "What's this?" James asked. Naomi looked at him with heavy eyes. "My mother wrote that before she died. She told me to give it to you only if I ever met you." James froze. "What are you talking about?" he asked. Naomi took a slow breath. "My mother was Eleanor Hart." James took a step back. He remembered that name, deep in his memory. Eleanor Hart was his former secretary from 25 years ago. The one who worked beside him when he was still building the first version of Elysium from a small office with only 4 employees. She had left suddenly, without a word. He had searched for her, but never found her again. She had cancer, Naomi said softly. She didn't want pity. She raised me alone. And she never told me who my father was. James's eyes widened. Naomi continued. "Until last year, when she was dying, she gave me that letter." James slowly opened it. Inside was a short handwritten note. "If Naomi ever finds him, tell James Harris the truth. She's yours." A silence filled the room. James couldn't speak. He looked at Naomi, this woman he had met only days ago. Brave, sharp, loyal, and now she was something more. His daughter. Flashback to 26 years ago. Eleanor and James stood in the office hallway late one night. Sharing coffee, she laughed at one of his jokes. They were close. Very close. But James was too focused on work. Too busy. Building a dream. He didn't notice when she started keeping secrets. When she became distant. Until one day, she was just gone. Back to present, James sat down slowly. Naomi remained standing. "I didn't want to tell you like this," she said. "Not in the middle of everything." James shook his head. "No, I should have looked harder. I should have found her. I had no idea." He stood up and looked her in the eye. "You helped me when you didn't even know who I was. You risked your life, and you had no reason to trust me." "I just followed what she believed," Naomi whispered. "She always said you were a good man." James walked toward her and put a hand on her shoulder. "You're not just part of this story now," he said. "You're the reason it continues." Ending suspense. A hidden file later that night. Naomi placed her phone on the table and unlocked a secure app. "There's one more thing," she said. "Something Victor doesn't know I have." She opened a hidden file. James leaned over to see it. It was a voice recording. Victor's voice. "Once I take the board vote, we bleed Elysium dry," Sell the smaller wings, fire the old staff, close the overseas offices. They think they need service, I'll give them speed. And anyone in my way? Gone. James stared at the screen. That's the final nail, he said. Naomi nodded. It's time the world hears what he really is. James had one final weapon, Naomi's secret recording of Victor planning to tear Elysium apart. But just as he was ready to reveal the truth, Victor made a shocking move that turned the entire boardroom upside down. And this time, it wasn't business. It was war. Early morning, Elysium boardroom, the glass walls shined under the rising sun. Every seat was filled. The entire board had been called for a special meeting. James Harris entered the room with Naomi, quietly at his side. Some board members glanced at her. Some whispered. A few looked nervous. They knew what this meeting was about. Victor. Elaine's name was already on the agenda. At the head of the table sat the acting chairman. We are here today to vote, he said, on the proposed merger between Elysium Airlines and Flight Corps, presented by former executive Victor Lane. James raised his hand calmly. Before you vote, he said, there's something you all need to hear. He turned to Naomi, who placed a small speaker on the table and pressed play. Victor's voice filled the room. Once I take the board vote, we bleed Elysium dry. Sell the smaller wings, fire the old staff, close the overseas offices. Anyone in my way? Gone. A chilling silence spread across the table. Board members looked at one another, stunned. Some faces turned red, others pale. One member leaned forward. Is this real? Naomi replied, recorded 2 nights ago. Victor didn't know I saved a backup. He planned to delete the original. Another member asked, why would he say that? James answered, because he never cared about Elysium. He only cared about control. Just then, the doors opened. Victor. Lane walked in, uninvited, unapologetic, behind him. 2 lawyers followed with briefcases in hand. Victor clapped slowly. Well done, James, he said. Very dramatic. He looked at the board. You're all being misled. That recording? It was edited, twisted, taken out of context. James didn't move. Naomi stood up. It wasn't edited, she said firmly, and we're ready to prove it. Victor smiled. Let's not pretend. This isn't about the truth anymore. It's about power. So why don't we get to the vote? Ow. Chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Harris, he said, do you want to respond before we begin? James stood. I built Elysium with my own hands. I didn't just care about profits. I cared about people. The workers, the travelers, the families. That's what makes this company different. He paused, then looked around the table. But if you vote for Victor, you're not just choosing a new leader, you're choosing a future without soul, a future of greed. He looked at Victor one last time. Whatever the vote is, I'll live with it, because I'd rather walk out with my name clean than stay and watch this company rot. The vote begins. Each board member was handed a small tablet. Private, anonymous. Victor's lawyers. Watched closely, James stood silently. Naomi stood beside him, but tense. One by one the votes were cast. A soft beep followed each one, and then the screen at the center of the table lit up. Elysium, board vote. James Harris, 7 votes. Victor Lane -5 votes. Result, no merger. Ejected. The room erupted in reactions. Some board members sighed with relief. Others looked angry. Victor's face turned dark. You'll regret this, he said quietly. All of you, he turned to Naomi. Especially you. James stepped forward. No. The only one who should regret anything is the man who thought he could buy everyone's silence. Victor stared at them, then walked out. After the meeting, quiet hallway Naomi stood alone by a window. Looking out at the city, James walked. Up beside her? I didn't know, he said softly. About you. About Eleanor. About the past. Naomi nodded. And it doesn't matter now. James looked at her. It does. Because this time, I won't disappear. And neither will you. She smiled for the first time, ending suspense anew. Threat rises far across the city. Victor sat in a dark office. He poured a drink and stared at a document on his desk. It was labeled, Offshore Holdings, Elysium Subsidiary Accounts Private. He picked up his phone and made a call. Plan B, he said. It's time. The person on the other end replied. Are you sure? It'll hurt everyone. Victor's voice was cold. That's the point. Victor lost the vote. He lost the board. But he didn't lose everything. So while James focused on saving the airline from the inside, Victor was already pulling strings from the shadows, and what he was about to do next could destroy Elysium from the outside. Next morning, Elysium headquarters, everything felt calm again. The sun was shining through the glass. Staff moved through the halls with quiet relief. The boardroom drama was over, or so they thought. James sat at his desk, reading over the latest reports. Stock prices were slowly recovering. Public support was returning after the airport incident had gone viral, and many viewers supported James. For how calmly he handled it, Naomi sat across from him reviewing staff recovery plans then. A knock at the door. James's head of finance rushed in. Sir, he said, out of breath. There's something wrong. Very wrong. James stood. What happened? The man placed a folder on the desk. We found multiple accounts offshore. One's draining funds. Millions are disappearing. Slowly, quietly. It started 3 days ago. Naomi's eyes widened. 3 days ago, she said. That's when I first gave you the files. James opened the folder and saw the truth. Victor was still bleeding the company. Scene. Shift Victor's secret office. Victor sat in a sleek, modern office far from the city. One wall was covered in monitors, each showing different stock tickers and banking systems. A woman stood beside him, a data analyst he had hired months ago. It's working, she said. $7.2 million has already been moved. Victor smirked. Good. Keep it slow. Not too fast, or they'll freeze the accounts. Do you want me to shut down the regional wings too? He nodded. Yes. Close the South America and Asia offices. First, quietly, make it look like poor performance. The woman hesitated. That'll cause panic. Victor's smile returned. That's the point. Back at Elysium, the race begins. James moved quickly. He called an emergency meeting with only 3 people. Naomi, Deacon, his cyber specialist, and his CFO. This isn't about public control anymore, James said. This is about survival. Naomi looked at the report. He planned this. Even before the vote. James nodded. He wanted to win either way. If the board voted yes, he'd take over. If they voted no, he'd crash the company from the shadows. Deacon interrupted. Sir, there's a pattern in the account movements. Same transfer company, same hour. It's all coming from one central IP. Naomi leaned forward. Can we trace it? Yes, Deacon said. But we need to act now before the rest of the funds disappear. Flashback Victor's earlier plan. Months ago, Victor sat with a team of financial hackers. He gave them instructions. Don't steal. Just reroute. Make it look like mismanagement. Confuse them. Investors panic. He didn't just want revenge. He wanted to collapse. Back to present, Naomi's discovery while Deacon worked. Naomi pulled out an old file of her own, something her mother had kept. Inside it was a list of names investors who had once backed. Elysium's early days. I think I know someone who can help, Naomi said. James looked at the page. Who? Naomi pointed to one name. Richard Maddox, tech billionaire. Former silent partner. He used to fund early airline tech, my mom once told me. He owed you a favor. James stared at the name. He hadn't spoken to Maddox in almost 15 years. Call him, James said. Tell him the future of the airline is at stake. Later that night, call with Maddox. Richard. Maddox answered. From a private island. He was calm, curious. You finally called me, James? I thought you'd never need me. James kept it simple. Victor Lane is draining us. I need a firewall. And possibly a financial blocker. Maddox chuckled. You still talk like a pilot, always straight to the point. Then he grew serious. You helped me once when I almost lost my company, I remember. I'm calling in that debt, James said. I'll send my people, Maddox replied. You'll have what you need in 24 hours. Ending suspense. Victor's final move begins. Across the city, Victor received a message on his screen, block a complete. Funds moved, staff cuts activated. He smiled, then hit one more button labeled Public Statement Draft, Company Failure, Blame. He was about to leak a fake story to the media that James had mismanaged the company, that Victor had warned them. The headline was already written, and within hours, the entire world would see it. Victor couldn't beat James inside the boardroom, so now he was using the media, the money and the lies to destroy him outside. And by the time the sun rose, the world would believe a story that wasn't even close to the truth. But James and Naomi weren't done fighting. Not yet. Midnight news channels began to shift hat, exactly 12:01 a.m. Headlines appeared on major business websites and financial news screens around the world. Breaking: Elysium Airlines faces financial crisis under James Harris. Anonymous sources claim funds mismanaged. Stockholders furious. Victor Lane warned company months ago was ignored. Victor didn't have to speak. His planted reports did the talking. The media painted James as the man who let the company fall. And within hours, millions of readers believed every word. Meanwhile, James's office. Lights still on. James hadn't slept. Neither had Naomi or Deacon. They stared at the glowing screens showing the news. Feeds in real time. Naomi clenched her jaw. He did it. He turned the media against you. James said nothing, Deacon added. Online sentiment dropped 60% in the last hour. Our investor forums are panicking. Flightcore stock just went up. Ours dropped again. James finally looked up. Victor's betting on fear. He turned to Naomi. But he forgot something. What? She asked. James stood. Truth doesn't go viral unless you make it personal. Flashback: 25 years ago, younger James stood in front of a small camera in a garage-turned office. He wasn't giving a business pitch. He was telling a story to future passengers, to investors, to his unborn team. This company isn't just about flying. It's about people. About the quiet man in the back row who just lost his job. About the nurse flying overnight to reach her family. About the child who's never seen the ocean before. It's not business. It's trust. Back to present, James records. One more message. He stood in front of a simple camera in a small conference room. No expensive lighting. No script. Just heart. Naomi pressed record. James looked directly into the lens. A few years ago, I walked into an airport like any other. Man, I waited in line. I showed my ID. I was mocked by people who didn't know who I was. That moment wasn't about pride. It was about respect. Something I've spent my life building for this company, for the people we serve, and for those who believe quiet leadership is still leadership. He paused, then continued. Victor Lane didn't just try to take my seat at the table. He tried to burn it down. So, here's the truth backed by proof, not leaks, not drama. Just facts. Then Naomi inserted the full voice recording, the real one, and a screen behind them showed proof of offshore accounts. Money movements, fake staff layoffs, and Victor's fake headline strategies. You can choose what to believe, James said. But I know this, when you tell the truth. With an open hand, it always travels farther than lies sent with a closed fist. Video posted 4:45 a.m. They uploaded it across every major platform, YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, even LinkedIn. Naomi clicked post. Then they waited. At first, nothing. Then, comments. Then shares. Then millions of views within 3 hours. Public reaction. A total reversal. This man speaks with class. I believe him. Wait, the audio. Victor planned this all. This feels real. This feels different. I'm with James. Naomi's hands trembled a little. Look at this, she whispered. It's working. 7:10 a.m. Richard Maddox responds, publicly. Tech billionaire once silent posted a statement online. James Harris built Elysium with soul. I've known him for 2 decades. He's never been about greed. And if Victor's the future, then I stand with the past. Suddenly, the tide shifted hard. Media outlets began retracting earlier headlines. Journalists demanded interviews. Stockholders stopped selling in. Some began buying again. Scene shift: Victor watches in Rajian, his penthouse office. Victor threw a crystal glass against the wall. News screens showed James's video everywhere. A reporter said, "Victor Lane has refused to respond to the new recordings. His legal team is silent." Victor's assistant entered the room quietly. "Sir, legal wants to know if you're prepared for an inquiry. They say if more documents surface, you could face fraud charges." Victor sat down slowly. "This isn't over," he growled. The assistant hesitated. "Sir, I think it is." "Out." Then he walked out. Back at Elysium, Naomi stares at the sky later that morning. Naomi stepped outside alone. She looked up at the planes flying above the city. She had once protected strangers. Now, she had helped protect her father's dream. James joined her. "You didn't just save this company," he said quietly. "You saved me." Naomi smiled. "I didn't do it for the company," she replied. "I did it, God, because now I know who I am." Ending suspense. A final document arrives just when it seemed like the storm had passed. A quiet alert popped up on James's computer. Naomi walked in. "What is it?" James opened the file. It was a sealed legal document, delivered anonymously. Inside it read, "Victor Lane was not working alone. Another name appears on all transactions, S. Clay." James whispered, "David Clay's brother. He was hiding." In plain sight, Naomi looked at him. "You're saying there's still one more enemy left?" James nodded, and he's already inside. James and Naomi had survived Victor's storm. The truth was out. The people stood with them. Just when it felt like the company could breathe again, final names surfaced. One buried in old files, one they never suspected, and one still working deep inside Elysium. Early morning. Elysium headquarters. James walked into his office just after sunrise. The sky was bright, the city quiet, and the war with Victor seemed finally over. He poured a cup of coffee. Naomi entered, holding the sealed legal envelope they had received hours earlier. "It's real," she said quietly. Ran the numbers. "Myself." James opened the folder again. Inside were payment logs, hundreds of small, quiet transactions. All led to the same secondary account. S. Clay. Not David Clay, the board member who had already been exposed, but Samuel Clay, David's younger brother. A name no one had thought about in years. Flashback: 18 years ago, Samuel Clay sat at a small desk, typing code. He was a junior IT analyst for Elysium. Quiet, nervous, smart. James had liked him, trusted him. He helped develop the early booking software for the airline. But one day, without warning, Samuel quit. James had assumed it was burnout. He never thought twice. Back to present, Naomi pulled up a database on her laptop. "He didn't really leave," she said. "Samuel changed his identity just slightly. New name, new contract, and slipped into one of our outsourced cybersecurity teams overseas." James frowned. "He's been inside our systems this whole time," Naomi nodded. "Hidden, watching, feeding Victor everything." James leaned back slowly, shocked. Victor didn't just have someone leaking documents. He had someone with a key to every door. Seen shift underground tech office far away. In a windowless room, a man in glasses sat at a glowing screen. Samuel Clay. He watched the company's network silently, fingers moving fast. But this time he wasn't stealing, he was erasing, deleting logs, wiping traces. Removing himself, he knew the game was ending, and he wasn't planning to be caught. Meanwhile, Elysium's command center. James, Naomi, and Deacon met again. "We have one chance," Deacon said. "I can trace his access point, but we have to do it live, the moment he logs in again?" Naomi asked. "What if he's already erased himself?" Deacon shook his head. "People like him always think they're smarter than everyone else. He won't delete everything until he's sure he's won." James looked at them both. "Then we give him a reason to log in." The trap is set that afternoon. Elysium's public channels posted a fake announcement. Company to launch full cyber. Audit all financial servers to be investigated by federal partners. It was bait, and it worked. At 2:14 p.m., Samuel's laptop lit up with a flashing alert. He swore under his breath. No, they're checking the systems now. He logged into the Elysium core servers to remove his last backdoor code. But the elite moment he did, Deacon locked in on his location. We got him, Deacon shouted. Singapore, third-party IT firm. Working under the alias Simon Grant. We've got the company address and security badge ID. Scene shift global call. With Maddox's cyber unit, Richard Maddox had sent James a team of legal and digital experts. Within minutes of Deacon's trace, they coordinated with international authorities. By nightfall, Samuel Clay was sitting in an interrogation room. Samuel's confession, a twist in the past, he didn't deny it. He just looked tired. He promised me revenge, Samuel said. Revenge for what? Naomi asked. Samuel looked at James. For my brother. He humiliated David in front of the board. He lost his status, his money. James frowned. David betrayed me first, sold us out. Samuel's voice turned bitter. He told me you forced him out, that you blackmailed him. Naomi shook her head. He lied to you. Samuel stared down. It doesn't matter now. After the interrogation, James speaks with Naomi alone. They stood quietly in a hallway. So many shadows, Naomi whispered. So many people hiding behind fake smiles. James nodded. I thought if I stayed quiet, led humbly, people would follow with respect. They did, she said. But the ones who didn't taught us how to see clearer. He looked at her. You know what's strange? What? James smiled slightly. We've never needed louder voices. Just stronger ones. Ending suspense. The final offer that night, just as James prepared to shut down his computer. A new message arrived. It was encrypted. He opened it. A short video played. It showed Victor, sitting on a private jet. His face was tired, but his eyes still burned with arrogance. You won the fight, James, but there's something I never told you. He held up a document barely visible but enough. I own 3% of your parent company. Enough to make noise. Enough to slow everything down. You want peace? Meet me. One last time. Then the screen went black. James had survived betrayal. He had beaten the media storm. He had stopped Victor's silent sabotage. But now, the final message came through. Victor wasn't hiding anymore. He wanted to meet. And the secret he still held might break everything James had just rebuilt. Private air hangar nightfall. James arrived alone. The wind was cold. The hangar lights buzzed in the quiet air. At the far end, a private jet sat on standby. Next to it, Victor Lane waited in a dark coat, hands in his pockets. No security, no lawyers. It's just the two of them. James walked slowly toward him. No words were spoken until they stood face to face. Victor gave a small nod. Didn't think you'd come, James replied. You said you had something I needed to see. Victor pulled out a small envelope. This is it, he said. The last card. James took it and opened it. Inside was a shareholding document from 10 years ago. It showed Victor's hidden purchase of 3% of Elysium's parent firm under a shell company name. Victor's voice grew cold, you see. He said, You beat me in the boardroom. You beat me in the media. But legally, I'm still a part of your empire. James raised an eyebrow. 3% gives you no control. Victor smirked. No control, no vote. But enough to stall any big move, expansion, mergers, even policy. With the right legal pressure, I can cause delays, scare off investors, create uncertainty. James looked him dead in the eye. And what do you want in return for silence? Victor's smile faded. I want you to walk away. Gosh. James didn't flinch. I already did that once. The company nearly died because of it. Victor stepped closer. I can't watch you win, James. Not after everything. Flashback their first years ago. A younger Victor and James stood side by side at a press conference. They smiled for cameras, partners, builders, friends. But behind closed doors, They had different visions. James wanted loyalty. Victor wanted leverage back to present. Tension builds. You used to be one of us, James said. Now you're just noise. Victor replied, noise makes people listen. No, James said quietly. Noise makes people tired. Victor paused. I lost everything, James. But you got legacy. Legacy took a deep breath. Legacy isn't something you take. It's something people give you when you've earned it. Victor's final offer? I'll sell the 3%, Victor said. Quietly, no press, no headlines. James asked, what's the price? Victor looked him straight in the eyes. You name it. James thought for a moment. Then he said something Victor didn't expect. The price is a public apology. Victor's expression darkened. You want me to admit everything? James nodded, not to save face, not for headlines, but so my team, my people, and the next generation can hear the truth loud and clear. Victor was silent. Then he laughed once, bitterly. You always were the better man, he muttered. He pulled out his phone and opened a recording app. Victor records a message. His voice was calm. But the truth inside it shook the air. Victor Lane knowingly participated in actions meant to damage Elysium Airlines, lied to investors, sabotaged internal systems, and created false narratives in the press. All to take control? It was wrong, and I regret it. Stop the recording. Send that to whoever you like. Then he handed James a signed share transfer agreement. It's over now, Victor said. James nodded once. No, it just started again without you. Victor turned to walk toward the plane, but before boarding he stopped. Without looking back, he asked quietly, Was I ever your friend? James waited, and replied honestly, You were, until you stopped being one. And with that, Victor stepped into the jet and disappeared into the night. Scene shift, Elysium headquarters. Next morning, James returned to the building as the sun rose. He handed Naomi the document. She smiled in disbelief. You got him to walk away? No more shadows. No more shadows, no more traps, Naomi asked. So, what now? James looked around. We rebuild, but this time, we build for people, not just profits. Ending suspense. A final letter arrives just as James sat at his desk. Delivery was placed on the table, a handwritten envelope. No return address. Inside was a short note. Mr. Harris, you don't know me, but I've watched your journey. I know what you stand for. I think it's time you joined something bigger. A name, Senator Ellis Kane. A business card, United Global Transport Authority. Confidential. James stared. At it, Naomi asked, Who is that? James replied, Someone offering something I never thought I'd be asked again. Looked out the window. To lead more than just an airline. The war was over. Victor was gone. The airline was safe. But now, a new door had opened. One that could take James from the skies to the rooms where world decisions are made. But accepting that offer could mean leaving Elysium behind, and Naomi wasn't sure she was ready to lose him. Next morning, inside James's office, James sat at his desk, holding the card from Senator Ellis Kane. On the back, handwritten in neat ink, One leader like you could shift global travel forever. Naomi entered the room, coffee in hand. You haven't moved, she said. James gave a small smile. Didn't sleep? She sat down across from him. So, are you going to call him? James looked at the card again. It's tempting. Naomi studied his face, but he sighed. I just got this place back on its feet. I just got you back. Scene shift. Senator Kane's private office, Washington, D.C. Kane stood at a wide desk overlooking the Capitol, calm, polished. Sharp-toed, he spoke on the phone. James Harris is the kind of voice we need. Smart, respected. Global if we bring him into the United Global Transport Authority. He'll carry trust across nations. Give him time, Kane said. He's still loyal to the company, but he's outgrown it. Just doesn't know it yet. Back to Elysium, a letter. Arrives later that afternoon, James opened a sealed packet from Kane's team. Inside was a proposal. A seat on the board of the UGTA Control over new international air safety protocols, authority to shape future airline funding and partnerships. was everything James had dreamed about years ago, before the scandals, before Victor, before the pain. He held the packet in his hands silently. Flashback 20 years ago, younger James stood in a hangar, watching a plane take off. An older mechanic beside him had said, "You know the sky's big, James, but the rules that control it? Even bigger. One day you'll be the guy making those rules, not just flying under them." James had laughed, but now that day had come. Back in the present, Naomi challenges him that evening. Naomi found James sitting alone in the hangar. "Tell me," she said, "what's really stopping you?" James looked at her. "You." She froze. "You're finally in my life again," he said. "I don't want to disappear chasing something new." Naomi stepped closer. "You're not disappearing. You're evolving." "But if I go," he said, "I'm not sure if I can still be the man this company needs." She smiled softly. "You built this company to fly without you. Maybe now it's time to fly further yourself." A powerful goodbye the next day. James called a private board meeting. The same board that once doubted him now stood silent as he spoke. "I'm not leaving because I'm tired. I'm leaving because this airline doesn't need saving anymore. It needs space to grow with new voices. I need space to serve a bigger mission." The board stood and clapped, not out of duty, but respect. That night, one last moment with Naomi. James and Naomi stood on the runway beneath the stars. He held a single envelope, his acceptance letter to UGTA. He handed it to her. "I want you to deliver it," he said. Naomi looked surprised. "You trust me with this?" James nodded. "Trusted me when I was just a quiet man in a terminal. Now I trust you with the next chapter, ending suspense. A new chair is chosen." As Naomi drove away with the letter, her phone buzzed. It was an email from the Elysium. Board. Subject line: Naomi Harris's official appointment letter. She opened it slowly, and inside: "Congratulations. You are now chairwoman of Elysium Airlines." Her hand shook. Tears filled her eyes. She looked into the mirror and whispered, "Mom, we made it." James was going off to serve the world. Naomi now sat in the chair once held by her father. But power doesn't come with peace. And on her very first day, sudden tragedy hit one of Elysium's planes. Now, all eyes turned to her, not as a daughter, not as an assistant, but as the leader. Early morning, Naomi's first day as chair of the Elysium boardroom, felt different. Naomi stood at the head of the table, the same spot where James once stood with quiet strength. The board clapped politely. Some smiled. Few looked unsure. She gave her first short speech. "I didn't get here by being loud. I got here by listening. And now, I'm ready to lead, just like the man who taught me how." But just as she sat down, her phone vibrated. Message: Flight 317, emergency landing. Live safe protocol triggered. Scene shift. Air traffic command. One of Elysium's new planes had experienced a rapid cabin pressure drop mid-flight. The pilot had safely landed. Several passengers were hospitalized due to oxygen loss. Media caught the story within minutes. Elysium's first crisis under new chair. Naomi Harris, inexperienced or unlucky. Is James Harris now? Porters gathered at Elysium's entrance, cameras flashed, and Naomi was no longer standing in James's shadow. She was standing in the fire. Flashback. Naomi's childhood. She remembered being 10 years old, watching her mother speak at a press conference. A female pilot had made a mistake. Her mother, then a legal advisor, stood firm against the media. When men fall, they get second chances. When women rise, they don't get room to fall at all. Naomi never forgot those words, and now it was her turn to stand up. Back to present, Naomi holds her first emergency briefing inside the boardroom. She faced legal teams, engineers, press advisors, And the airline's safety director. Some board members whispered. She's not ready. Where's James? But Naomi silenced the room with 5 words. Tell me what went wrong. The engineers explained a faulty valve in the oxygen system. It had passed inspection but shouldn't have. Naomi asked only one question. How? Many other planes use the same system. The answer. 16. Naomi makes her first bold move, ground them all, she said. A pause. Immediately. But chairwoman, the CFO warned, the cost millions in delays. Stock will drop. Naomi didn't blink. I'd rather lose money than lose lives. Scene shift. James in Washington, watching from afar. Ames sat in a quiet hotel room after a long day at the UGTA office. On TV, he saw Naomi's emergency press conference. She stood at the podium, calm and strong. Safety isn't a cost. It's a promise. Elysium Airlines will always choose people over profit. James smiled faintly. The reporter said, New chairwoman Naomi Harris is already showing the world who she is. James whispered. She always knew, they just needed to see it. Later that night, Elysium staff Respond mechanics worked through the night. Pilots supported her decision. Passengers praised the honesty online. Naomi walked through the hangar at midnight, alone, one by one. Staff members walked up to her, not to complain, but to say, you made the right call. Ending suspense. A mysterious email appears as Naomi finally sat at her desk. Exhausted, her computer pinged. Subject, urgent re. Flight 317. Inside was a file. No name, no signature. The message read, it wasn't just a valve failure. Someone changed the inspection logs. You have a traitor inside. Naomi sat up straight. Her hand trembled slightly. She looked out the window at the Elysium logo glowing in the dark and whispered, who would do this now? Naomi had just proven herself to the world. But even victory couldn't last long because someone had hidden the truth. A traitor had changed the inspection logs that nearly killed dozens of passengers. And now Naomi had just hours. Then before another plane went into the air, and James. He was about to receive a message that would shake his heart all over again. Early morning. Elysium Cyber Division. Naomi stood over Deacon, the cybersecurity lead. Find out who altered those logs, she said. I don't care if they're a janitor or a vice president. Deacon worked fast. He traced logins, timestamps, hidden folders. Then he stopped. This can't be right, he muttered. What is it? Naomi asked. Deacon turned the screen. The ID used to change the safety logs belonged to Director Paul Stroud, head of International Aircraft Inspections, one of James's oldest hires. One of the men Victor had once personally recommended. Flashback 5 years ago, Paul and James walked side by side at a company dinner. You built something special here, Paul had said. James smiled. Help me protect it, Paul raised. A glass, to Elysium. But it had all been a lie. Back to present, Naomi confronts Palshi. Didn't call security. She didn't shout. She walked directly into Paul's office and shut the door behind her. You tampered with inspection records? She said, Flight 317 could have crashed. Paul stayed quiet, then slowly said, It wasn't supposed to be that bad. Just delays. Complaints. Enough to push your name out and bring someone else in. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Who hired you to do this? Paul said nothing. But then he smiled. Scene shift. James's phone rings. James stood in Washington, D.C. In a UGTA meeting room, his phone buzzed with a call from Deacon. Double quote, sir, Deacon said. We found something. Paul Stroud sabotaged the oxygen valve logs. James froze. He whispered, Paul. Yes, and there's more. Deacon sent over a file. James opened it on his tablet. Attached was a private email trail, not just between Paul and Victor, but between Paul and Senator Ellis Kane, the same man who had invited James into the Global Transport Authority. Scene shift. Naomi's decision. Naomi stood in front of the board. I want Paul removed, and I want his files turned over to federal authorities. Board hesitated, but he's connected to Kane, one of them warned. Naomi didn't blink. No, I know, Senator. No CEO, no shadow, gets to play with lives for power. We're not Elysium Airlines if we sit quietly while people like that run our skies. Meanwhile, James confronts Kane. James stormed into Kane's office. You tried to use me, he said coldly. You sent a saboteur into my company. Kane didn't deny it. You're a symbol, James. That's why I wanted you. But your daughter, she's emotional. She makes people nervous. James stepped closer. She makes people believe. Kane raised an eyebrow. What are you going to do? Walk away from this seat? James nodded. I'd rather stand for something real than sit with liars. Back at Elysium, Naomi takes the mic that evening. Naomi stood on the tarmac in front of the very plane that had been sabotaged. Press surrounded her. Cameras flashed. She didn't hide the truth. She told the world what had happened. She named the flaw. She promised investigation. She made one promise. Elysium was built by a man who was once ignored by airport staff. Today, it's led by someone who will never ignore a single voice, passenger, or risk. We are not perfect, but we will always choose courage. Final scene, father and daughter, reunited. Days later, James returned. He didn't come to speak. He didn't come to take back control. He came to see her. Naomi stood near a window, holding her mother's photo. She would have been proud, James said softly. Naomi looked at him. I did everything I could. James replied, and that's why I know this company. Ending moment, a quiet man leaves the airport one last time, as James walked through an airport terminal, this time as a passenger. Not the owner he passed. Through security, quietly, one guard looked up and recognized him. Wait, aren't you? James smiled gently. Just flying today. No red carpet, no special badge. Just a man with a suitcase, leaving behind a legacy that had survived everything. Because once they mocked the quiet man, but in the end, he built something louder than words. Respect.